All right, we are live here on Pixel Fondue. I've got Derek Cicero and Shane Griffith from Foundry. No longer the Foundry, just Foundry.
Yeah.
And we've got a Modo 11 launch today, as well as some new purchase options, namely subscription, and some new upgrade options, or option, namely, getting a 1 second here. I'm I can hear there's me live streaming myself so I could read comments without it being muted. So we've got some new upgrade options as well. That's changed a bit. Licensing has changed a bit. So quite a few things to go over. And the first thing I want to do is just let you guys introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about yourselves, how you got to Foundry, what you did in your past lives, what you like to do in your free time, what your favorite movie is, stuff like that. Shane, why don't we start with you?
Oh, first up. So yeah, hi everybody. I'm Shane Griffith. Let's see. I've been with the Foundry about a little over 4 years now. Prior to that, I was at Autodesk for a number of years. I was a 3ds Max product manager there. Prior to all that, I worked in the games industry. Worked on MechAssault. It's the picture behind me. It's on the wall there, and a few other titles over the years. Lots of different stuff. So I've done my tour of duty in production, if you will, for about 10 years prior to even coming into Autodesk and on the software side of the business and stuff.
So when you worked in the games industry, well, first of all, what company made MechAssault? That sounds familiar.
It was Day One Studios here in Chicago. It was a Microsoft live launch title at the time. So yeah.
Oh, okay. So were you doing a similar job, marketing type thing, or were you a product managing, or were you actually in there animating?
So I was the technical art director on the project. So the production team mostly reported into me. And I basically managed the art production aspects of the process.
So you've worked on the production side of things in this industry as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I went to school to be an artist. I have a fine arts background. And even in my early days, I started as a modeler, and then worked into animation. All different types of areas of the production process. I've worked through a lot of different tools over the years, from Softimage to Wavefront before there was an alias Wavefront, and a lot
Yeah,
of
I remember those. Remember old Softimage on my SGI Indigo. I've got two of those Indigos. I used to have them in this room, but they're out in the lobby now at Sabretooth that I bought on eBay. I still think they're the best looking machines
they
ever
are.
made. Yeah, the purple Indigo and the Indigo 2 and the teal one. Anyway, I see you got a bike on your wall. Avid biker, or is that decoration?
So yeah, in my lack of free time, I try to do triathlons every year and not die.
Ah,
He's got medals. You
you
can tell he finished at least a couple there.
I finished a few, yeah.
you finished a couple. Do you swim in Lake Michigan? Please tell
Oh
me you
yeah.
don't swim in Lake Michigan. Oh,
Usually
okay.
Saturday morning, sunrise, I'm out there in the lake. Yeah.
Wow. All right. I used to go to Lake Michigan as a kid and swim in the summer. That is some cold water, but it's fresh water,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is nice. Like I just got back from the Gulf Coast, and we get a mouthful of that. You're just like much better in Lake Michigan. Okay, Derek, let's move over to you. Give us your elevator pitch on Derek Cicero.
I joined back in the Luxology days, 2010. Brad brought me in over. I was working at Oracle at the time, and then Sun Microsystems previous to that, working in the Solaris group, doing open source software. So basically, running a lot of the project to open source Solaris, which was, I'm sure still today, is the largest open source project, or at least the largest attempt at open sourcing something that was ever probably tried, in an effort to kind of compete with Linux. Was there for several years. Prior to that, had my own consulting company for a number of years, and then did a lot of work for a number of IT, web infrastructure, building websites for Wells Fargo, Chevron, places like that. And so I joined Luxology 2010, when 401, kind of in the 401 days, and then coming over to 501. I actually realized today that I think with Modo 11, I've been here for more Modo releases than were prior to my joining. And then ran the Modo team in 501, 601, 701 days, and then moved over, did a modcast with Brad a few years ago about this, moved over to run our SPD project. So working with some of our key customers like Honda, Adidas, a few others, and really kind of looking at how to technologies and a lot of things like the colorway technologies over to some kind of enterprise accounts or enterprise installations, if you will. I know that's always been kind of an interesting hot button topic on the forums of exactly kind of what that meant for Modo development. I will say a lot of the work that was done was brought back into Modo, and things like procedural modeling, for example, were really kind of brought out of that group, as well as things like colorway. And then about, I guess, a year ago, came back over to the Modo side, so kind of running the Modo team with Shane, as well as colorway, some other things that we're working on kind of internally, really focused obviously on kind of growing the Modo user base, taking kind of some of those learnings from the design side of what we learned from working with some of the design companies, like Adidas, like New Balance, informing both the Modo product, but also kind of what else we can do around the Modo product, and kind of the ecosystem, if you will, to drive that. We've seen really good traction in the design space. And so, yeah, so for the last year, kind of been working, very closely, Shane and I, on kind of a lot of the things we're going to see. I think, we'll talk about today: subscription, maintenance, the roadmap. I think the changes in how be developed and how where Modo was in its life cycle as a product from when I started, like I said, in the 401, 501 days to where it is now. It's a very different marketplace. It's a very different product. And so I think a lot of, like I said, what we'll talk about today kind of reflects on that.
Sounds good. So Derek, I've known for a number of years, and Sun Microsystems actually we used to be one of the main clients of Sabretooth back before they were bought out by Oracle. It's funny when you think about Sun Microsystems, they're such a giant in Silicon Valley, really one of the sort of founding members of Silicon Valley. And now I think you ask people today, there's plenty of people who have never heard of Sun Microsystems. It's bizarre. So you think, like, if you go over to Facebook, their main campus, that's Sun Microsystems. Yes. That's like Facebook acquired that.
My office.
Right. There's a big thumb there. It's so weird. I drive by Facebook now. There's that big, like, whatever stupid thumb thing they've got. And there's like all these tourists always like taking pictures by the thumb. If you drive by Facebook, there's buses that drop people off there. I always find that kind of weird. But that was Sun Microsystems. I used to go over there for a lot of meetings. I remember when Brad brought Derek on board, and I think Brad would be one of the first people to admit this, that Brad Peebler, previously from Luxology and the Foundry, great community builder, great marketing guy, great user, really understood Modo. But he really needed somebody to get things done behind the scenes, make sure products got out on time, things got done. I know that's one of the reasons he brought Derek on. And Derek is not a public phase of Modo. You don't see him necessarily on the forums a lot, or at least the public forums. But he is I know he's very highly regarded behind the scenes in terms of getting stuff done. And one of the things you talked about is doing sort of a special projects unit, or SP, I'm not sure what you called it. But essentially, SPD. If you remember, and Brad used to talk about this a lot, the core product is really called Nexus, and that's where all the development goes in. And Modo and Modo Indie, a number of other products were sort of baked out of Nexus. And stop me if I'm getting this wrong, but I think this is correct. Yep. And you guys have, like lots of large companies, like Autodesk or any other company, you have some major clients, and some of these like Adidas, New Balance, Honda, and they request special development efforts. So you have multiple teams working on Modo. Some teams are doing special development efforts with these large clients you have. They're paying you guys a lot of money, kind of like SolidWorks used to pay Modo or Luxology a lot of money to have their renderer embedded in SolidWorks. So you have different income streams coming in from larger clients. And what you were trying to say, because I'm not sure a lot of people necessarily know this, is that a lot of that development finds its way back into Modo. So something like the procedural modeling stack, the mesh operations we have starting in Modo 10, that originally started as a special project feature. Somebody must have requested that. Maybe it was New Balance or something. And that found its way back into the public release of Modo. Correct?
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
And so, yeah, and I'll say, originally the idea was that when they sort of first built Modos, that Nexus and Modo would sort of from the beginning be separate kind of things, and Modo would be one of many things built up of Nexus. And as development went on, that kind of quite didn't happen. It's in some things it did, like in the rendering component. To your point about SolidWorks, we were able to kind of, but the idea was that it would be a little more component based. And as development happened, it didn't quite work out quite that cleanly. And so one of the things that we've done in the last year is actually make that separation that was kind of the original vision So now there really is a Nexus team, and Stuart Ferguson, I know someone had asked, Stuart and Alan, still here, still brilliant, still working hard. They've essentially kind of created now this true Nexus team, and so they're really that fundamental layer of Nexus, and that's where a lot of the, for example, the underlying performance improvements have to happen from. So when you look at something, people say, how can this be faster? A lot of times that's completely refactoring, how something works, like in the shader tree, and that's what we sort of look at as a Nexus level development. And so the Nexus team is there. Come into the Nexus team. So if someone's working on something that may come in the Nexus team, they will basically ensure that it works across the whole platform, integrate that, and then the other sort of consumers above that can have it as well. So Modo obviously is the biggest and kind of greatest example of the consumer of that Nexus framework, but there are others as well. And so one of the things that has been, I think, extremely important for the long-term development of the product and where we're going in terms of things like performance and stability has been that Nexus, the creation of that Nexus team. And so we're starting to see dividends, paid on that in Modo 11, and we'll continue to sort of see that in the future.
Okay, so there's a little behind-the-scenes development about Modo. Let's go back to Shane, because we are talking about the present and future of Modo. So we just had a product release, number 11. But I think initially, I think what I want to talk about first is subscription options, because that's sort of a hot, obvious, not sort of, it is a hot topic in the software world right now.
It's a soft spot for you, isn't it, Greg?
And did you guys send out a letter by chance? I don't believe I got one from you. So yeah, my issue. Teresa, by the way, I believe Teresa will be on from Autodesk next week on Pixel Fondue. So we're trying to get that set up still. And she's got some, give her some credit. She's coming on. So yes, I've not received a letter from you guys, but we are doing a live stream. And so this is an opportunity to sort of explain what's going on. I think let's just break this down into component parts to make it a little bit easier to digest, I think. So let's take a look at this. I think most of the people probably watching the live stream are probably current Modo users, and there will be thousands of views later on. A lot of these people won't be current Modo users. So let's talk a little bit about, let me fix my microphone. Let's talk a little bit about if I'm a new user to Modo. I don't have Modo. I've been thinking it's cool. They've got this new subscription option. I'm taking a look at it. Shane, if you want to explain how subscription works for a new user, non-Modo user coming to Modo.
So first, I do want to say, the main thing that I really want everybody to absorb is we're adding subscription. We're not taking, and I'll plug into this more, but we're not really taking away any of the options that you had before. Yes, there is no more upgrade, but I think I'll explain to you kind of how upgrades are working towards the future. And we'll probably do a little bit of math on that as we get to it. But for all intents and purposes, if you knew of Modo and knew of the business models that we had before, it's the same and it's practically cheaper, especially for this year. It is cheaper. But for subscription, we added this for a very, very particular reason, because as we built up kind of awareness into the industry, and as these other companies started building out subscription business models, it was really interesting to me because we've always been one of the cheaper products on the market. But all of a sudden, we were at $1,800. We were getting compared to products that are that much a year in their subscription fees, and yet we were perceived as more expensive. So for many new users, they're very comfortable coming into more of a rental or a subscription-based model. And in many new companies, it's incredibly important because they could scale up a lot easier. They don't have a lot of capital, working capital to fund a lot of licenses right out of the gate. So for them, straight out of the gate, it's a lot cheaper of a product to get started with. It gives them a chance to build up.
So let me give a scenario here from my experience working in the production world, and I can go back to before anybody had subscription. If I go back to a production company I worked at here in Silicon Valley back in the late 90s, we do a lot of game cinematics. We'd have somebody from Electronic Arts or Sony or Sega. We get game assets and we want to do the animation, but we were a Lightwave house. A lot of times we get assets in Max format or Maya. And so not only did nobody know how to use Maya, but if we're going to bring up, no freelancers could afford their own copy because this is a $16,000 program at the time, I think. So in order to bring Maya people in, we had to buy Maya. You couldn't rent it, even if it was just a month-long project. You couldn't rent it for a year or rent it or subscribe for a year or subscribe for a month. You had to buy it. And so there definitely was a need, and that's still happening today, obviously. So here at Sabretooth, I have my Modo license, and typically sometimes when I have freelancers come in, I expect them to bring their own license because I'm not going to buy additional licenses just to have freelancers come in and out for projects. But what I'd rather do is just get Modo for a month. That's one of the subscription options, or a year, and not have to drop $1,800 for a project that may last 3 weeks to 4 months. So there's definitely a need for subscription from a company point of view. For all of you, I know there's some people out there that think subscription is bad in every scenario, and I'm telling you, as somebody who owns a company, that it's a great option to have. And my problem with Autodesk earlier was no, how to sort of rolled out this subscription only idea.
Right.
So this is it. I think I'm being fair here in saying that. So that's one way to look at it. But also as a single user, you're still looking at $1,800 isn't a drop in the bucket for something you may not typically use. So Shane, I know you do a lot of metrics on this type of stuff. Like I used to use Lightwave. I still own Lightwave, presumably. I don't have it installed anymore. I never use it anymore. If I added up the number of years I used it, it's probably 4 or 5 years. But what is sort of the average user lifetime of Modo or a 3D program?
That's a fair question. In our install base, we still have really a high percentage of the one-on-one users still using the product today, and very active with the product today. I'd say we're not the typical kind of company, and it's growing as the industry has matured. 3D content creation tools have been around for 25 plus years now, so that grows out. But I would say, in general, the people that are active have bought, sometime in the last 3 to 5 years.
So, and we can do a little math.
The population of those people.
Right, and we could do a little math on this later, but a Modo subscription for 1 year is now $5.99 US or $59 a month. So there's two options there. So again, if you can't really stomach or afford the $600, right away, there is a way to do that on basically a 12-month payment plan. It costs you a little bit more to do it that way. But that's kind of the typical scenario there. So and we'll get into this math a little bit, but what I'm trying to drive at here is that not everybody uses these programs for a lifetime. So if you use Modo for 3 years, there's $1,800 down, plus you have to do some upgrading, which will to stay current via maintenance, which we can talk about in a minute. But if you just rent for 3 years and then never touch it again, like I never touch Lightwave again, it still can be a financial subscription can still be the better financial option. So, the main point I'm trying to get here with subscription is that there's a place for it. I think as we all agree, as long as there's an option. And the thing that was
our strong belief as well.
Right. So
Brad and I, when we started, talking about this years ago, there's a real need. There's a real true need for this business model in the marketplace. It isn't the only option though, and I think that's really, really key. I think there are, very, equally just as valid of reasons for ownership, and really putting that control of that aspect of things back into the consumer's hands, and maybe there's many reasons in production as well where you lock into a release for 3 years. There's no reason to upgrade for those 3 years. You're stuck using that software with everything that's in it, no matter what, for that 3-year production cycle.
So let's give a scenario. Say I'm a new user, Modo looks interesting, I can give this a shot, I want to subscribe. I go to the website. Now, my options are monthly or yearly. Is there any sort of 3-year package deal or anything like that with a discount, or just keeping it simple, monthly, yearly?
Yeah, right now we try to keep it just really as simple as possible. There's a lot of options already there, so we didn't want to mix that up too much. It is something that I think is on the table and considerable for doing a 3-year prepaid type of an option or something like that. But for right now, it's purely subscription, pay for a full year up front, or you pay in monthly installments.
Okay, so let's say I say, all right. Go ahead, Derek.
I want to jump in there and say one thing is actually two different things. The first is that it is an annual commitment that's paid monthly. So we don't have a kind of a true month-to-month rental, if you will, option. It's something we know people have asked for. It's something we're definitely kind of going to look at. But as of right now, it's an annual commitment either way. It's just the payment terms are annual or monthly, not the license terms. The second thing I was to say is to kind of, I think to Shane's point is, this is something we've been discussing since, honestly, back in Luxology days. I mean, there's been a customer request and a customer need for subscription, or at least I will say a request for what subscription offers, regardless of whether you call it subscription or not, for a very long time. And so that's one of the things we've kind of been very careful and cautious with, is making sure that as we do this, we do it in a way that as much as possible is something that people look at as an additive thing, not as a changing of what we had scenario. But this has been something, I think it's an important point to make, which is that this has been a discussion point that we've had for several years. It's not something that's sort of come out in the last,
Okay, so let me clarify a little bit. So you can subscribe for a year. You can either pay $600 up front, or you can pay $59 a month for 12 months, correct?
Correct.
And so you're paying an extra $120 a month if you don't have those $600 up front, but that $59 works in your budget. Again, that's just an option you're doing. And then at the end of a year, does it auto-renew? Does it just stop working after 365 days? Is there a grace period? How does the renewal work?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it does auto-renew. Pretty much all of our plans now, all of our products, maintenance or subscription, automatically renewal at the end of their term. There are some, situations, if you bought through a channel partner or something like that, where that wouldn't by default always occur. But by default, if you're buying off our website today, it's going to auto-renew automatically. There is options. So if I, even on day one, want to go in there and stop auto-renewal, I think you have to do it on day 15. You have to wait a little bit of time, just the way it's coded. But if you wanted to stop auto-renewal, you can do that. You can just turn it off. You'll still get notices in your email 60 and 30 days in advance of that renewal term that it's coming up. And what do you want to do? Do you want to renew or whatever, or what have you? And then, again, the choice is yours at the end of that term. But otherwise, it'll automatically charge again on your credit card at the end of the year.
So let's say I sign up and I'm like, okay, I don't have $600, but I'm going to do this monthly. And then 4 months in, I'm like, God, I just don't have time for this. Is there any way to cancel, or are you locked in?
You're obligated to that full 12-month term, payment term. You're contractually obligated to that. There is a 14-day cancellation policy right away, which is available on the website as well within your account settings, and that will process an immediate refund. But outside of that 14-day window, you're obligated to those 12 payments.
Okay, so you're locked in if you get that.
That's why it's an annual. It's an annual thing that you're really just paying in 12 payments.
Right. So annual subscription paid via monthly or for a full year at once. And okay, so
just on that topic, I do think a pure month-to-month option is something that, like Derek said, it's something that we would consider. But we just wanted to go out of the gate with this with as simple and straightforward as options as possible.
So I'm kind of glancing at some of the comments here. It looks like some people are already saying that they'd like to see month to month. So you've got some people asking that already. And the other thing I want to bring up, I think this is fair, is that if you look at Algorithmic, they have essentially a rent to own model where you pay subscription, but it goes towards essentially a payment plan towards owning the software. Is that something you guys are considering, or is that not on the cards right now?
It's much more difficult to do that with the kind of the existing business and business models that we have, and it's very complicated to explain the reasoning why that is. But we discuss that at length at a lot of ways. It's complicated on the books because you're technically loaning, that money out until they actually pay it all off. It's not really a rental scenario. There's a lot of ways you can get around that on the books as well. We looked at that. But at the end of the day, to create something that was as neutral as possible for people that were already perpetual customers, people that were seeking perpetual, and then people that are subscription or seeking subscription, we really felt like this particular mix of the models was the best way to go instead of the rent to own.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. I mean, one of the things that's come up, in a lot of the conversations is people say, well, did you consider this, consider that? I can honestly say we literally considered everything. I think the hard part is that fine line between, but then not giving them, a giant matrix of selections to pick through. And so that's why I think, from our standpoint, it was, how can we pick something that is both simple, but gives people the most flexibility? And also, this is not necessarily sort of the final decision point, right? I mean, I think we're going to put this out. We're going to see what people say. We're going to get feedback. And if the answer is that we need to tweak, change, do things 6 months from now, I think we're open to that. But we didn't want to come out of the gate with this really complex matrix of 17 different ways to decide how to do things. And to Shane's point, we do have kind of a legacy customer base that we need to make sure that we're giving them something that they feel is correct and fair while bringing this new.
So let's talk about the current customer base, because I think we covered subscription, and there'll be, we could bring up some questions later as we go bring in some more Pixel Fondue members in about a half, or, we're going in a little bit slower than I wanted to here. But if I didn't mention this before, we are going to bring on some other Pixel Fondue members like Adam and Ed, and they're going to come in and ask some other questions, and also look at the chat stream over here on the live chat and try to get questions from the viewers as well. But we can get back to subscription if we need to. I think the main, most of the people watching, I think, are current users and are interested in the new upgrade option. Well, it's not really an option, the new upgrade method, which is maintenance, and the new licensing scheme, which is also different. And then we can also, after we do this, then we'll get into a little bit about Modo 11 features and how sort of the new model in which Modo is being released in sort of a 3-part series instead of the old big release and service pack. So let's go back to current users. I'm a current user. We got a license of Modo. Previously, I believe I would pay $4.99 for an upgrade. And you'd announce a new version. Sometimes you'd have like a bit of an early bird special or something, but you'd announce a new version. And then anytime up to right before, if you announced version 9, anytime up to before version 10, I could buy version 9 anytime in that 12 to 18 month period, or however long it took to create the next version. So I can sort of upgrade at my leisure. I would go in, your typical user would go in, they would look at the beta or the forums, and they would look at Skype and Slack, and they would kind of see what people are saying about it, and they would finish up their current projects, and then they'd eventually upgrade. Now we're moving to a maintenance model, which is different. I'll let Shane or Derek let you guys explain that, but I will just say maintenance, like subscription, is sort of a loaded word. And I think there's some very valid,
especially with the Foundry and RLM context. Totally get that.
And yeah. By the way, I still can't get nuke working, but I'll just go back to that. All right. So let's Shane, I'm just going to let you sort of take it away here. Explain how maintenance works with current users. Explain how it's different than the old model, and just sort of lay it out here, what you guys are doing. I'm just going to lock you in as the presenter here.
I whipped this up right before the call because I felt like it's a super sexy spreadsheet here, but I felt like just seeing the math on some of this helps explain it just 10 times better than us just talking about it and you reading about it in FAQs and so on. So today, pretty much you have a couple different, basically you have the product that you're buying a license for at $17.99. So this is kind of the Modo 10 scenario, where we have a lot of customers that do upgrade every year. So they pay their $4.99 pretty religiously. every single year. I think, Greg, you're one of those. Thank you very much. And then we have, not to say that this is bad. Like I said, there's a lot of reasons to skip, and it does happen. But it's literally almost 50-50 between these two types of profiles, where we have customers that buy a release, and then they, obviously, you just spent $1,800. It's going to be, sometimes it's pretty tough to do $500 the next year right afterwards. And sometimes, like, we have a lot of what I call fence sitters, January, February, March, that are just sitting there waiting to buy because they don't know if we're going to drop a new release on them. And we don't, for a lot of different reasons, we don't want to announce that, in January that there's a new release coming in May, because obviously nobody's going to buy until May comes.
The Osborne computer conundrum, right?
Yeah. So, that creates, really a very shortened sales cycle and a very spiky revenue model for us. So that's a problem for us. It's kind of a problem for the buyers in a lot of cases. They might need something, but they're really hesitant to buy as well. But for whatever reason, the pattern, generally follows, every other year. Let's just say that. I mean, sometimes people go every third year, but generally speaking, people are upgrading every, 24, at least 18 to 24 months, I'd say is an average.
Now, let me interrupt you for 1 second. So if I have, let's say, a Modo 601, let's go back in time a little bit. 701 comes out, I don't want that, or I just don't have the money or whatever. 801 comes out, I'm like, I got to have that. And I upgrade from 601 to 801. Was that, I used to upgrade every year, so I don't remember. Was that still just $499, or was you're upgrading two versions? Yes. Was it a little more?
It's been ever since, actually, for the longest time, since 701, it's been $499, $495. I mean, there's been changes in other currencies because of the exchange rate, moving around on us over the years. But 601, it was $399, and then it pretty much been $399 since the beginning, if I remember right, Derek. But there's been different promos at different times on both of those numbers. So.
Yeah, I think the other question Greg was asking is, we never made a difference between what version you were upgrading from. So if you had skipped one version or 5 versions, the upgrade price was always the same.
So regardless. There was not an additional fee for getting 2 versions worth of upgrades at once. It was just
correct. That's and that was one of the important things we wanted to maintain, is this idea that the version that you're coming from is kind of irrelevant as long as you're coming from a prior version.
That was a good deal. Should have never noticed that before.
Yeah,
good job.
The numbers could be this. Like, you could have bought 701. It was a little less than, but you could have bought it at, the regular price for the license. Then maybe you upgraded 801, but maybe you didn't. And then maybe you did 901, and that's where you paid the $499.
Okay.
So that's, a difference of just the years that I'm putting here. You can think of it as releases, because we're typically, we've pretty much been on the 1-year cadence for releases.
So that's the old way of doing it, and then the numbers on the far right are initial purchase plus 6 years of upgrades.
This is the sum of what you paid for that total 7-year customer life cycle, if you will.
Okay. Sounds good.
So if we take subs, subs is straight through $599, and I'll show you in a little bit where subs kind of crosses over, but you can see. It's still even after 7 years, it's cheaper than buying, what you would have, paying for a license, paying upgrades every single year.
Right.
So even all the way up to, I think, almost 8 years out, subs is a cheaper model. Just a pure subs model is cheaper than what we were doing before in the past. So that's really important. But then we gotta be careful of that number as we cross over again into the legacy install base, and what happens there, right? So what we've decided to do is, for anybody that's ever owned Modo, you can add maintenance now to your basically to your license, and that'll get you upgrade. It'll get you the upgrade to Modo 11. But it'll also get you any new updates that are put out in the 12 months time. And the price of that I'm sorry for everybody that's joining everywhere else in the world. There are, Euro and GBP prices for all this, but I know that the US one's a lot easier and a lot better. But the price of that is $399. And what we're saying is, as long as you stay, keep maintaining that. So maybe you're, this user, like in the past, then that's what you're going to pay every year. So we'll extrapolate that out. So for the Gregs of the world that have been pretty loyal, have been buying every single year all the way along, what we're offering now is actually a cheaper path forward than what you were paying. That does come with its pressures. It does come with, okay, well, what happens when I get off, right? So maybe this year I get on board at the $3.99 deal, and then you know what? I say, screw you guys, I'm not getting enough value. So I jump off at the end of in 2018 April. I jump off. I don't renew. Maybe 2019 in April, I want to get back on. And the price, what we're saying the price is right now to get back on is $5.99. So that has an inherent penalty of $200 already built into it. That you basically have to pay more for skipping a release, a little bit more.
So that's a change from the previous model where you had in the Modo 10 skipping you could skip multiple versions and still pay $4.99. This one, if you initially there's a discount, it's $100 less, and you can continue if you're like me and you just do it all the time anyway, you just maintain that $3.99 all the way through. But if you don't upgrade every year, you are going to be hit with a $200 upgrade additional fee, basically $5.99 to catch up to the latest version. And then how does it work after you've caught up?
Right, and so that's where a lot of the discussion has occurred on the forums today already. And again, I do want to say, yes, it's $200 over the $3.99, but it's really, if you look at how we're built out this model compared to the existing legacy model, it's $100 more. So maybe I put that out. I don't jump back on. I skip a year. It's $5.99. So if I'm again the same type of scenario where I bought a license, bought 3 upgrades over 7 years time frame. I've only bought 3 upgrades and a license. Same scenario down here. This model, the way it maps out, is only $100 more, more expensive now than what it would have been in the past.
So after 7 years, if you do the skipping thing, then if you did that previously, you like to skip, you are after 7 years, you are paying $100 more. But 7 years is a pretty long time. And if you go 10 years, then you're paying like $1,000 more, I guess, than $100 each for each of those additional 3 years. And so that's really the biggest change is you are on perpetual. It's not the biggest change because we'll talk about the other one now because it's maintenance instead of upgrades. So if you're like me, there's really no change other than I'm just sort of prepaying instead of paying, like a month or two later, whatever I normally do. And it's just going to be cheaper. So the type of Modo users who always upgrade, it's essentially cheaper now.
It's more cost effective. Yeah.
More cost effective. If you're one of the ones that likes to skip, and there may be more reason to skip now because you're not buying an upgrade after the program comes out. You're able to analyze it. You're paying a maintenance fee prior to the program coming out, so you're not really sure what's in it yet. And so there may be more reason to skip, or you may feel more like you want to skip more because you're not sure what's in there, but you will be paying a higher upgrade fee or maintenance fee,
right.
So $5.99.
The way I look at it is, there's a discount for trust to a certain extent, right? To be brutally honest, if you trust that we're going to put value out into the year, we're giving you a cut on the price. If you're more of the type of you got to prove it to me first before I give you money, then you're going to pay a little bit more of a premium on the price.
Right. And that's right. And that's one way to put it. And that's, I almost think it's better. I mean, let's be honest. This is, you guys are running a business, and if you can get people to pay every year, you'll give them a better deal. And that helps you guys plan out development and keep
obviously this is our goal, right? We make
right. That's your goal. Right? You right. So you're totally happy charging less. You just would like people to do it all the time.
Right.
And then, and so again, like taking a look at this, when I look at this, and we talked a little bit about this before, I totally understand the $5.99 jump if you skip. I was actually kind of surprised, like I said earlier, that there wasn't a penalty previously in the old upgrade model.
A lot of people did ask for that. A lot of people that were like, hey, how come this person that just upgraded from 301 got the same dang price that I did, and I paid every single year? So,
Right. I never understand that when people like look at other people and say, well, how about that guy? Like, what does that
Yeah.
matter? What is like, so let's go to, so there's that initial one, but then you are stuck at that 599. As of now, there's no plan to get back on the trust, even if you upgrade every single year, like the people who
Right.
never skipped.
Yeah. If you did this, then yes, but you're still less than, again, you know, whatever you were kind of in the past. Right?
7 years in, you're still less.
Yeah.
If you skip and then pay every year, that okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. So 7 years in, so like 8 years in, you're like basically tied. Then 9 years. So look, and this is we're talking 10-year time frames for like we're $100 of difference.
Yeah,
So
actually, so I don't always do well with formulas live, but I did a quick KGAR calculation on this. Make this black. So even at that, even if you did this, that's a 4% increase in price per year across that 7-year time frame.
right,
You know, if I go back to what we were at before, you're talking about, you know, an inflation rate, if you will, of 0.5% over 7 years.
right. So
That's what that 599 means. So it's really, it comes off, I think, stronger than what it really is. And, you know, if you are this person, you know, I'm not going to, you know, it'll be interesting. Again, we're talking about a problem that as a business, we're not even going to start to experience until 4 or 5 years from now. Is the first time that we'll start to see people go back to back with this. So, you know, who knows?
right.
You know, this could very well come back to 399. You know, I don't know. All I know is we're going to, you know, obviously going to keep monitoring this, see what the behaviors are. We just wanted the rules to be simple and straightforward. We didn't want it to be some vague statement on, you know, a big legal document of, you know, what's it going to cost me if I drop off maintenance? Well, if you drop off maintenance and you come back, it costs you this. And that was the main point. You wanted something to point to give you guys an example of what it would cost and then let you do this math.
Yeah, and one thing I want to kind of add on all this, I mean, I think as the kind of the spreadsheet shows is, you know, the position that we're in kind of in the marketplace is one where we want user growth, right? We want to maintain the folks that are currently using it and keep them current, and we want to bring as many people into the Modo kind of family as we can. So the purpose of kind of how we're costing this out is not to maximize sort of per user revenue. It's really what can we do to give people options to bring in the people who can't afford the upfront cost and bring them in. Also make it for people who stay current, to incentivize them to maintain. And that's really our goal. I mean, our measurement here is really on kind of user growth and seat growth moving forward, not on dollar value on a per user basis. And I do think it's and I get it, you know, people kind of, it's always a difficult conversation to have kind of on forums with people about the more business side of things, but that is our objective, right? Is to get as many people using Modo as possible.
So yeah, go ahead, Derek.
One more point to that is, you know, one of the things we used to do, which we got a lot of negative feedback on, is we used to, you know, have a big release. We'd have $100 off. I think we did it for 601, 701, and it was a limited time offer, usually between 2 and 5 days, and we didn't have trials. We didn't really trial the software. You kind of had to take our, you know, the trust, take our word for it, right? And a lot of people found that to be somewhat not, you know, the right scenario either. Trials are now available on day one. And Shane was a huge proponent of that and kind of pushed that from day one. So, you know, you have the option now to go and try the software. And I think to your point you're making earlier, you know, we have to convince you that we're doing the right things and where we're going and the stability and the performance and rolling in the features to convince you that it's worth giving us, you know, the money every year, right? I mean, I think that's kind of our objective and our goal.
So let me just sort of editorialize for a little bit here.
Sure.
So when I, you know, first saw this plan, I think the gut reaction for most humans is, okay, you're penalizing us for getting off because you're bumping up the price and keeping it there, and we're not getting a sort of loyal, we can't go back to the loyal user discount. Now that's got to go with perception and reality here, because the reality is, like, if you look at somebody like me, I upgrade every year anyway. And this is actually going to be cheaper for me, even though I still look at this. My gut reaction is, it just seems kind of like a corporate-y thing to like penalize somebody, then not go back. And the other issue, of course, with maintenance is the one that I think maybe is an even more valid issue, because I think Modo at $3.99 or Modo at $5.99 is I think is a tremendous value. I mean, that's the going rate for 1 day of work for a Modo freelancer. So 1 year of use of the product for 1 day of work. I just think that's a tremendous value. I made the same argument with Creative Cloud. I think it's a tremendous value. But if we're looking at maintenance, what you're essentially asking users to do is say, okay, we want $3.99 from you. That's less than before, but we want it up front. And so you're paying us prior to really knowing what's going to be in the software. So I'm not going to see a software release, take a look at it, say, okay, there's some features I kind of want, kind of don't want. I'm just going to wait a while. I don't need to do this right now. Maybe I want to buy a new GeForce card right now for $5.99 and wait 6 months to upgrade to Modo. I have some flexibility with the old upgrade options that I don't have with maintenance. Maintenance, if I don't want that penalty, then even though it's only $200, but it's $200 every year, I continue to do it. If I don't want that penalty, I've got to pay up front. And so, yeah, I do want to know. I want to have an idea of where Modo's going. I think that's a fair question, right? So I know you can't put out specific features like Modo 12 is going to include XYZ, but I think you need to give your users, I think you'll agree, a good indication, sort of like Side Effects did in a recent live stream they did, where Modo's going, where you're sort of concentrating developer resources. And so when we dish out $3.99 up front for another year's worth of the software, we feel like we have some clue as to what we're paying for.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement, a fair argument to make. I will say, one way to look at it, at least right now, is especially for other users that are on 901, what you're looking at is, okay, well, did they across the 10 series, maybe 1001 or 10.0 came out, it didn't have much in it and it didn't have what I wanted, but by the time they finished or we finished 10.2, that's worth an upgrade. So really what you're buying into right now is not only the upgrade to the 10 series, but you're also buying insurance that whatever we release across the 11 series, you'll also get. So it's a little bit of, at least to get on board today, it's not quite paying entirely for the future, right?
Oh, so what? So are you saying if you're a 901 user right now, today, April 21st, you get on 1 year maintenance, $3.99, you get 10 and 11?
Yeah, I mean, it'll basically all the features that are there.
You get bumped all the way up. Okay, yeah. Right. So you can look as a 901 user, you can see what's on 10. Say, is that worth $3.99? By the way, it is, if you haven't used the mesh operations and some of the other things in there. And you can also look at 11. I think it's noteworthy. I think we really need to point out something here about how Modo is developed now, because there's been a big difference in releases since 10 came out.
Yeah, because by the time we finish the 10 series, there's a lot of people on the fence, right? You get to the end of the year, we actually put out a substantial amount of value through the course of that year, but then we're at the end of the year. So everybody's, January, February, March, just like every other year, are sitting on the fence because they know 11's right around the corner, right? So this hurts us as a business, but where this model helps us and you is you can buy now in January. You can buy at the end of that cycle, knowing that you're not going to get screwed by another release coming out 2 months later, right? You're going to get not only what you're buying, what you just saw come to market as valuable to you. You can buy that today, but you're also going to get what we're going to continue to bust our ass on and put out for the rest of this year. So on that perspective, it's a little bit, like I said, it's buying an upgrade with insurance. You want to look at it that way. What it does for us as a development team is it's just greatly improved how we develop the product. In the past, we would do a whole bunch of things. I mean, this team is amazing to me. They're probably the best development. They are the best development team that I've ever worked with in the sheer volume of stuff that they can do. I still have a lot of great friends at Autodesk. I don't want to diss them, but
feel free.
What we've been able to do on this architecture, on the Modo architecture, just blows me away in the speed at which things get done. So it has a lot of testament to what Alan and Stuart created from the very early on in the get-go, but just also the talent that we do have on staff. So all that aside, we are able now, instead of going off what I call the stability cliff, we're able to linearize our improvements to the product. So the product is truly getting better release to release to release. And we proved that with the 10 series. So anybody that followed us all the way through, 10.0 to 10.1 to 10.2 with a few V releases scattered in between there, every single step of that series improved quality, improved features, improved value all the way through there. So it's working for us in a very big way. And what we've seen so far coming out of beta, from beta customers like you, Greg, is 11.0 is that, really set to do the same thing. We're not regressing in quality. And it's really just because of the way that we're structured to do these things.
So let's talk about this. Go ahead, Derek.
So I want to kind of echo a couple of things that Shane said, because one of the things I've been here since, like I said, 401, and the development team that works on Modo is really unbelievable, and it's unbelievable because, one, they're really, really talented group of developers, but two, they really want the features to be correct, right? And a lot of times the pressure that they're under to feature done by people like me, probably, is kind of puts them in an unfair position a lot of times for what they want the feature and to have the polish, to have the fit and finish. One of the things we've really moved to in the last 9-12 months is getting the creative specialists that work with Modo, that go visit customers, more involved with the developers. So they're helping developers and position where they can say, you know what, this feature needs a little more time, a little more soak time, a little more fit and finish. Let's move it from 11.0 to 11.1. Let's move it from 11.1 to 11.2. Let's make sure that it's instead of kind of ramming it in there, if you will, to kind of get that checkbox, it's about getting it right. And that's really been, I think, a shift that we've wanted to do, that the developers want to do, that everyone on the team wants to do. And so this kind of goes into that. And so I think to your point of, if I'm a customer, again, now you can trial 11.0 on day one. If you're an 11.0 user, we're going to give you 11.1 public beta. So you can sort of see, to answer the question of, well, how do I know what's coming next? You can see what's coming next in 11.1. Same thing when you're on 11.1, 11.2. In terms of how we publish and the best way to publish that, other than kind of putting out those public betas before they're released, I think we have some options there. Similar thing with Modo VR, which we talked about at the live event, of kind of taking some of these things that may not be in a release for months, maybe really kind of bleeding edge technology, providing some of that in there, and really getting to a point where we're not kind of making it more difficult to use the everyday product in an effort to get some of these newer features to users. I think there's a way we can kind of serve both of those goals in a way that I think is a lot less disruptive than it has been in the past, to be perfectly frank.
So let me summarize a little bit. If you've been with Modo a long time, or if you're a new user, this is how it used to work. You'd get, say, Modo used to make very large leaps with each upgrade. If one reason was it didn't have a lot of stuff. So if you went from Modo 2 to 3, Modo 201 didn't even have animation, like, at all. So, this is a major feature. We can animate now. Then in Modo 4, we've got, dynamics, or we've got particles. We have actually deformed things now. So, so you used to have this large set of feature releases on the initial day that took about 18 months or so, maybe 20 months to come out. It wasn't yearly. It was longer than that. And then you get these service packs. If y'all remember, you get SP1, SP2, SP3, and everybody who's used Modo for a while kind of knew that around SP2 or so is when it got stable and comfortable to use. And it's different now. If you look at Modo 10 came out with, I think, fewer features than would normally be with a Modo release. But then when 10.1 came out, you had like another third of those new features come in. Then Modo 10.2 comes out, you've got a whole nother set of new features. They're not just bug fixes. So feature releases are staggered throughout the upgrade cycle, not just bug fixes. So you had Modo 11 come out today. This is not, and it does look, I think we can all agree, if you look at the feature list of Modo 11, it looks light compared to past releases of Modo. And so, you have to, what I want you to talk about a little bit is this isn't Moto 11, just this and bug fixes for the next 12 months. There's more to be coming out in terms of new features, which each 11.1, 11.2, 11.3. And so when you're on subscription or you're on maintenance, you get that each of these sort of, instead of one major release, 3 mid-releases per year. Is that what you're shooting for, 3 per year?
Right now, yeah, we're trying to target a cadence of 3 releases a year, roughly every 4 months.
So roughly every 4 months, and you're trying for a year. And I think this is important because if I'm signing up for a year's worth of maintenance, I kind of want to know I'm going to get all 3 of those. I don't want to sign up. I say I'd sign up for maintenance in July, and 11.0 is out. 11.1 comes out maybe whatever that is for August or so. I want to know that by I'm going to get those sorts of upgrades. I'm going to get my money's worth in maintenance. I'm going to be disappointed as somebody who paid for maintenance and I get 2 sort of upgrade jumps instead of 3. So you're really shooting for 3
I think
in a
it's
year.
Pretty safe to say you'll get 3 pretty much at any point where you would buy. It's pretty likely that, especially about right now, if we meet our milestones, it's pretty likely that you would get 4 because we're trying to move the first one a little bit earlier in the year, but we'll see how the rest of this year goes. It's only the end of April right now.
So again, you've got these are just you've got these releases coming out, and there's going to be new features, not just bug fixes, in each of these jumps. So if I buy maintenance on 11.1, let's say I don't get 11.0, let's say I get 11.1, I can expect 11.2, 11.3.
Well, there won't be 11.3.
I'm sorry, 11.2, 12, and probably 12.1 is what
Possibly.
you're saying.
Right.
Okay, so, and then if I don't get 12.1, at least there's going to, and I waited, I'm one of those guys who likes to skip a year, there's going to be public betas of all these out. So I can always jump on and get a beta, correct? And see if I'm interested in these features if I want to upgrade.
So the betas and any, we're going to do a lot more exclusive technology previews and things like that. Those are going to be limited to current subscribers or maintenance customers only. So what
about a demo that will be available?
You'll be able to when it ships, you'll be able to get a trial.
Okay.
Each cycle, I don't think we'll stop that. I'll continue to evaluate that. But we did that last year and it worked fine. We basically gave everybody in the world 90 days of trial.
So if I skip a year, then a new version comes out. A number of releases ahead, I could get a trial and say, okay, I like this. It's worth my $600. I'm gonna get this. So you're not blind. So if you don't like to go blind, do sort of prepay with maintenance. You can do the skipping thing and you get trials and evaluate the current version. You don't hold those back anymore. But if you stay on maintenance, you can at least get betas of upcoming versions. So that may help influence your decision if I'm going to make sure I prepay that maintenance for the next year because I've seen the beta of 12.1, so to speak, and I like what you guys are doing. I'm going to go ahead and pay
exactly.
Okay.
So at that point in time, you likely you'll be current. You'll start to get the betas of the next cycle, to kind of feed you on of what's coming into your future.
So I think that's kind of a big deal because previously in the old days, we didn't do any sort of public beta. There was some beta testers and everything just kind of got thrown out there at once. So I think that's a good change. If you're on maintenance or subscription, you can take a look at public betas of the upcoming versions, and that will help you inform your decision to stay on subscription or stay on maintenance because you are in effect prepaying, so you need as much information as possible.
Yeah. So, and I know we're running tight on time, so I actually want to get into, and I'm very comfortable in saying certain things about what is coming, right? Because we're very active on 11.1. In fact, we're probably about a month or so away from code complete on that particular release before we start fine tuning in, working out any of the issues on that. 11.2 is actually simultaneously starting in production as well right now. So. That's another different change. We're trying to run 2 releases overlapping. So we're not just doing development in 4-month cycles. We're actually trying to get to a mode where we're doing 2 teams on 8-month cycles instead of all one team, all in, hands-on on one cycle. So the things that we're, this year really, heads down focused on is a lot of stuff around just workflow, making the product better and easier to use, fewer clicks. There's been so much feedback over the years that we just couldn't get to. A lot of features, like you said, like animation was added in an entire release. Well, that was coded probably in about 6 months time frame. It didn't get all the things in it that it needed to get done. So there's a lot of things that the users have been, using the tools in these areas for many years and had good feedback that we just haven't been able to go back and revisit. So that's a big focus of what you see. It's a lot of little things, like you said, but those little things I think really add up over the course of this year.
So one thing I was sorry to add one thing is that we sat down before we started 11 and we kind of had a list of about 400 plus legacy bugs, which were bugs that were just because we're so focused on new features or because we're focused on other things, were bugs that were maybe not critical, but from a kind of quality assurance development standpoint, but were the kind of things that you go to the forums and people say, how come you haven't fixed this? It's been 2 releases, and so we've made a list of those kind of bugs. I believe almost 200 of those are fixed in 11.0, and the remainder of them are targeted for 11.1 and 11.2, and that's kind of what Shane's talking about, is this idea of just changing our methodology to be more focused on kind of working on something, completing it, and putting it in when it's ready. And if it's ready means it's 11.1, 11.2, it can pick the train as it leaves the station, if you will. And I think to your point, Greg, by the 11.2 completion, you'll have that same feature list as though in the old days would have gone into 11.0, right? But the difference now is we're trying to target those in a way that they only go in when the customer is ready to say, okay, I'm ready to use this. The workflow here, it's not just a feature. The workflow works. It's you've kind of really made it a completed feature.
Yeah,
right.
I would say by and large, the people that come to me and say, well, I didn't buy Modo. It's not because I didn't buy Modo because it's missing XYZ feature. I didn't buy Modo because this didn't work, or it was too crashy for me on whatever release such and such in the past, right? So those are the big barriers for us in a large way of selling more product, getting more users out there.
So I think we're getting at is you expect to see an emphasis on a stable Modo, a sort of a staggered release pattern is going to help add to a stable Modo because you're not rushing to get features in that a release day where you try to throw everything out at once and then just bug fix throughout the rest of the year. I was happy to see an emphasis on the modeling tools in Modo 10. I think modeling is Modo's biggest strength, and I think it always has been. If it has a reputation in the industry, it's for modeling. I think you mentioned earlier when we got an animation in early, like 3 or 4. I think it was 3, maybe deformation by 6. And oftentimes you see these massive efforts put into a feature. It's out there, and then it sort of languishes over a year. So now that we've had this re-emphasis on Modo modeling, which I think it did start out so far ahead, but obviously programs like Maya have put a lot of emphasis on modeling. In fact, have been even making it more Modo-like in some ways. Can we expect to see continued emphasis on modeling tools in Modo?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're spot on there. That's where we maintain our competitive edge, is modeling, and what I've been calling more so singular asset creation. So by and large, people that create texture and UV and even animate things, they do it on a singular item inside a Modo. They don't necessarily do full-on large scene productions. There are a number of people, and I think you guys at Sabertooth are one of those that do that. So I'm not saying that doesn't occur, but by and large, Modo is a tool that's used with a lot of other tools in production for pure content creation.
I agree, and that's one of the points I've been trying to put forward is you have literally hundreds of thousands of licenses out there, programs like Unity and Unreal Engine. You have Substance, Designer. You have all these programs that require modeled assets. And I would love to see Modo become the premier go-to package for hard surface assets. I think ZBrush has is a fantastic program for organic assets. I think Modo can make advancements there as well. But I'd really love to see this continued push towards Modo being just the fantastic world, premier program for hard surface assets. I think I know we're sort of running out of time, so I don't want to just blab on about what I want to see in Modo. I'm looking at some the stream over here. Now, I want to Pixel Fondue members, if you want to jump in now. We'll get some other questions. I want to throw one more thing at Shane really quickly, and I think you're probably going to address this later. But can you give people an indication what's going on with Modo Indie? Is that something you're going to address? Are there changes coming? And what's happening with Modo Indie?
So right now we're in the process of building and compiling it under 11.0. Derek and I, we've been completely swamped with just getting subscription and maintenance and all this other business stuff out the door. So it honestly hasn't been the forefront of thought for a greater part of 5 or 6 months, to be frank. That's next on the list. So once we get through today and the rest of the weekend, and probably take a little bit of a breather next week, we'll start up conversations on that right away. It's important. It's important to the strategy. I don't see it going away, but I can't really tell you exactly what it will be. I don't, it just needs a lot more conversation between us and customers and things like that. I don't see it as staying on Steam long term. I think there's been a lot of difficulties for us as a business operating there. Steam is a great platform, but it's also very much a black box to us. So it's really hard for us to do outbound communication to those users. And then to also, obviously, we want to upsell those types of users. So it's hard for us to operate that business as a true stepping stone to the major, the rest of the Modo business.
Is there an upgrade path from Modo Indie to regular Modo maintenance?
There is. It's very, very manual. And it's, you basically, it's very difficult.
I
sort of.
Not something that I highly want to advertise because it's a complete pain in the ass for me to manage right now.
Okay, but is that something maybe you would consider? I'm not sure how many Modo Indie users you have out there, but surely there's Modo Indie users saying, you know what, I kind of want the full program. What do I do?
Right. There is a way to do that from the perpetual versions. So that if you bought a perpetual Modo Indie version and then you're buying a perpetual Modo version, there is a way to do that. If you're on the subscription versions of Indie going to subscription Modo, then no, there's, you're basically trading whatever, 15 or 19 bucks a month for 59 a month.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I was going to say about that is, I mean, the part of the Mood subscription does give us a lot more kind of options in terms of how we manage the trial process, how we manage Indie, and that's kind of what we're looking at, is sort of what is the right way to bring people in at different levels of kind of experience and knowledge into the product, be it trial, be it Indie, and then kind of move up through the product as or not, depending on the kind of where they are. But yeah, and so it needs to be, it needs to be more of a overall kind of funnel. And that's kind of what we're going to look at in the next couple months here. But yeah, I think strategically, we absolutely want to get Indie better.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's a start. Make Indie better. Okay.
Get more users in general, and that's the big goal. Like Derek said, all these changes are really, how can we, 2x, 5x the volumes of users that we have. I mean, we're doing good. Don't get me wrong, but obviously there's a lot more potential, a lot more opportunity out there for us to grow, and we got a taste of that with Modo Indie. So we just want to. We got to find a lot of these pieces to get there. Are
you going to keep the public informed on Modo Indie through the forums? What's the best place as a Modo user to go? Now, part of the let me just not really a sidetrack. I think this is relevant. People want to hear from the Foundry, and listen, Brad People was a big personality, and he was the best in the industry at communicating with the communities and building a community. And those are big shoes to fill. And I don't think anybody's expecting you guys have full-time jobs as well. It's like, and Modo is a much more complicated product now than it was 10 years ago. So, but people would like to hear from you guys, or maybe just some sort of point of contact from somebody on the inside. Like, what's going on? Like, where do you go about new Modo Indie news? What do we expect to look on the forums? Where are we going to hear something?
You go to Pixel Fondue.
Pixel Fondue, all right.
You guys are.
We could do that.
You guys are killing it. So I really, on that point, I really tremendously appreciate what you and Yazan and Brad have done with Pixel Fondue and getting this off the ground. I think it's doing all the things that we wish we could do if we had the people and the support and the talent to do it. So I applaud you for that. I hope to do more things like this to help get that information out there. I think you guys have an excellent vehicle for getting that word out. We'll continue to do our best on the forums and any other major news announcements and things like that with emails and direct communication. But I really see our relationship between Foundry and Pixel Fondue growing a lot as we move forward, into the year to come.
So one of the things I want to, Derek, or somebody say it?
I'll just add to that, just that, I mean, I think, Brad was very unique, right, in terms of what he could do. And for us to try to duplicate some of that wouldn't work, quite frankly, And so I think we need to find some different ways. And I think, I think coming here, for example, I do think we need to do a better job of communicating. We've been pretty quiet lately. I think part of that was because with the subscription stuff, we kind of knew we had one opportunity to kind of roll this out and want to make sure that we really did it in the best way that we could. But yeah, I think moving forward, we definitely want to see the creative specialists out there more, talking more about the features. We put out a series of quick clips as part of 11.0. We really want to, I think, focus less on kind of big marketing events and be a lot of what Brad was great at early on, right? Just kind of constant conversation, right? Just sort of having a much more stream of conversation. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely an area that we need to get better at. And, hopefully we can work with the folks over at Pixel Fondue to kind of improve on that.
So let me just expand on this a little bit. One of the reasons I wanted to have Derek and Shane on here is to show everybody that these are actual human beings who work their ass off at Foundry and who really do have Modo's best interest at heart. I know Shane probably hasn't slept in about 24 hours. And it is different without Brad there. And I know the community misses modcasts and things like that. And over Pixel Fondue, we should do more live streams. We'll try to do a better job of some of this stuff. I think let's throw it out to the community here. It's a community and it's more fragmented than it used to be. It's not just the Luxology or I still call it Luxology, the Foundry forums, Foundry forums. That name has changed again. It's not just Foundry forums. You've got Slack, you've got Skype, you've got Facebook, which I never even go on. You've got a bunch of different places. And I really want to throw this out to the community. If you want Modo to succeed, let's not lament Brad not being around anymore or Shane and Derek trying to fill his shoes, because that, like Derek said, that's just not going to work. Derek's not going to come on and start doing modcasts. It's not the same thing. So let's take it upon ourselves to have a positive community outlook on Modo. And I always say we're all in this together. So we'll keep doing these things at Pixel Fondue. And I just like to see more positivity in the forums and things like that. So I'll leave that there. I think, Ed, you've been sitting there patiently. I know you guys probably have to get going here pretty soon, but do you have some time to take a few questions from
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Ed, I'm just going to leave it to Ed to pick out some stuff to ask, and you guys can answer.
Well, you guys actually systematically went through everything that I had written down here. The biggest thing was Modo Indie. We have a lot of indie artists that were just interested to know about the bridge to regular Modo, as well as what the roadmap or any outlook is for Modo Indie. I think you guys pretty much covered that. The second one was about animation in Modo. A lot of people interested in animation.
Yeah, so the biggest thing there is, is the performance issues. It's so strange because, on one hand, I see, amazing things that, certain companies out there are doing in Modo with, multiple characters and everything out there. And it runs great for them. It's no problem at all. And in the order of operations deformation, I think is a really, really powerful and unique thing that no other tool in the industry really can kind of come close to right now. So there's a lot of great quality to the tools that we have there, but definitely performance is an issue. Some of that was the weirdness with spline deformers and things like that. We solved a lot of that in 11.0. So we're very keen to these issues and in solving the foundational problems of them. So the goal for this year is to really kind of wipe that slate clean, get all those issues done with, and then we'll have all the great tools that have already been there will be really useful again, and we can get back on the track of putting more new features in animation. But for this year, performance, solving bugs. And I'm not talking about just playback caching like what you're seeing right now in 11.0. we are very hard at work at solving the problems of interactivity and interactive keyframing performance and things like that. So there is an end-to-end plan there. It just is going to take time. Those are some very, very deep core problems that we're working on. We have really pretty good ideas. We're getting pretty close, and more to come there.
So I think I just want to jump in. So I think Shane's right there. Like, I use animation in Modo a lot. I really push what it does with Sabretooth. And I don't tend to run into feature limitations. I run into performance limitations. And the idea of putting a bunch of new animation features out there prior to getting performance accelerated, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I think you do need to, I like what you're doing. Let's get performance a lot faster. Let's get a better advanced viewport. I think that's made some good, every single release of Modo since that's come out, the advanced viewport has gotten attention. So getting those things together, and I think then we're going to start seeing more animation features. Ed, you had another question?
Oh, I have a selfish question that's just for me. I noticed that in 11, you have some Mesh Fusion assemblies that shipped with Modo in the preset browser, and I had a chance to try some of those, and they're super awesome. I was wondering if that's going to be something moving forward that you guys will do more of, like maybe just presets kind of, because they're almost like little bundled tools. They're
absolutely. We had a wish list of they're like 25, 50 of those. We got 4 of them. We got some. But there's a lot more of those to come. I think that really, to me, that's both Daryl and I, we have a weekly call. We talk regularly, and that's our vision for modeling is how can we create more Lego blocks to make this entirety of the system just so much more user-friendly and then fast to produce, fast to ideate, fast to just get it out there. And what I like to call in a lot of industries as 3D sketching, and not not truly constructing an object, but just getting it out of your brain as fast as you can. So you're definitely going to see more and more of that. We're going to make it a lot easier to acquire content and assets directly within the product. We're doing a lot of stuff with the asset browser to make it more online aware, or at least more team friendly. So having centralized depots of that content. You've already started to see some of that work even in 10.2 and 10.0 to make that easier to path to a lot of those things. So that's a really big focus for what we're doing with the out-of-the-box experience, if you will.
Speaking of Lego blocks, if you have not gotten the Lego loader for Modo, go on the forums. We'll do a Pixel Fondue tutorial for this for sure. We're going to do a Pixel Fondue Lego contest as well, like Lego Battle or something like that. And but go on the Foundry forums and just find the Lego thread and go in there and download that and play with it. It's the best time killer on the planet right now. Eric Silve, give him credit for doing that. He just gave it out for free. So I love that about the Lego loader. So I'm going to throw this. I'm going to ask this because they're asking me to ask this, Shane. So you ready?
Yeah.
Rendering. Let me ask this in a better way. When we used to talk about GPU rendering and CPU rendering in Modo, this is probably back in the Luxology days. I know there was a lot of tests. In fact, I actually did a lot of tests for Brad in this. In fact, I did all the GPU. I did all the iRay materials back in for the CATIA release, back when they integrated iRay, and it only worked in like a $6,000 Quadro. That's how so GPU has changed a lot since then. And the sort of line we got from Foundry at the time, which was fairly accurate, was that it's just not there yet. But now GPU rendering is certainly here. So let's start there. Do you guys concur that GPU rendering is a part of our reality now, and something that we should be looking into as one of the premier graphics companies on the planet?
Yeah, no, I think I've posted a couple probably short comments on that. And there's not a lot I can say, but other than we are researching things there for sure. It's not something that we're not going to do. I will say that for sure. It's something that we're very actively researching, but it has to pay off, for you as a user. If we put a GPU renderer in Modo, it has to at least match what the existing renderer can do, and be better. It has to be faster, right? I don't want to put something in there that is not as good, not as many features supported, and is slower, but it's GPU. Hey, we got a GPU renderer. Isn't that great? That's not the goal here. So we are working with third-party sources, researching things there. There's a lot of things that we're looking into as well. Alan's fully on board with this. He's really keen to see something happen here. So we'll see.
What? Maybe I'll try to get Alan Hastings on here and have him just theoretically give him, because I remember talking about this with Alan. God, probably 7 or 8 years ago. Back, I remember talking to him, Steve Worley, back the old F Prime days. This is when this stuff was first coming out. But Alan is a graphics nerd, so he's obviously been on top of this, and one of the few guys out there who's probably written an entire rendering system nearly on his own. So yes, GPU rendering, as you heard Shane say, definitely looking into. I believe you said it's not something we're going to do. Is that what you said? The double negative?
Something like that.
Okay. I think that's probably as good as we're going to get.
Yeah.
I will say, you look at V-Ray. V-Ray GPU does not support all the features as V-Ray CPU, but it's still a very usable and useful feature.
Right. And that's kind of the problem we have. And there's a lot of things like with the Monte Carlo caching and types of techniques that are out there. There's a lot of things you can't really do in a GPU pipeline, GPU render pipeline. So things are improving there constantly. I mean, that space is moving really, really fast. The other aspect of it is cloud. I mean, I think cloud will play. I'm not saying everything's moving to the cloud, but I think especially for rendering and scaling productions in small businesses, it's going to become an important factor as well. And today, that's still very cost prohibitive to do cloud rendering on the GPU. You can do it, but it costs more, and it costs more for the Amazons and the Luras of the world to put those types of hardware and systems out there.
Sure, and let me be clear, there are GPU solutions for Modo right now. Octane for Modo has a great plugin developer, Paul, and then, of course, V-Ray is super tightly integrated, and there's 4 of our Luxology people over there working at V-Ray now, Chaos Group as well. So you do have some options, and you guys work with these companies, presumably, to help their integrations. Yeah,
so we work as best as we can to solve the problems they have to get the best quality integrations on the market. And I think V-Ray, what Chaos Group was able to do really shows that. I think the Modo implementation of V-Ray is really, really top quality.
Ed, did you see any other
I saw
questions?
somebody, Emmanuel Flores was asking about Modo VR. He wanted to know if there's any news on that. So.
Yeah, so back in LA, we did a little bit of a sneak peek on Modo VR. This is one of the things that we likely will release as a kind of a labs type project. Maybe later on this year. It'll be an exclusive thing for customers that are on maintenance or subscription. So again, get on board now. There's going to be lots of cool stuff coming there with the public betas of the next releases and these other kind of sneak peek things. But really, we don't know what we're going to do with it. We don't know what people want to do with it. So it's one of those things of we got to build it. We got to build it to a certain capacity and functionality, put it out there. You get a lot of feedback and understanding of what will it become. Will it become a new product? I don't know. Will it become a feature of the product? I really don't know. And that's really why we got to get in this mode of these longer term developments being more public in a way that we can get that feedback.
So I really like the idea of having Modo VR features available to me as a subscriber or as on maintenance. I can go in there and check them out, and you get that feedback loop, which is going to make that a better product in terms of, instead of just dealing with a smaller beta team. I'd also like to see, now, as again, similar to VR, and you look at some of what Facebook was announcing the other day at their conference, bringing the world around us into 3D is something that's going to be an ongoing process for the next, forever, right? And getting a lot more projects at Sabertooth that deal with point clouds and photogrammetry, and people are starting to understand what photogrammetry is. You have clients coming to you and saying, "Hey, can you do that photogrammetry thing? Can you get that scanning?" Could that be something that could, we don't quite know how this is going to work yet, but maybe we have some photogrammetry or some retopo or some point cloud type features that can go out to the community and get that feedback loop going, so we get something really usable that could be integrated into a product later on.
Right. Yeah. I'll let Derek speak to that. This is really his.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, kind of really the goal moving forward. So actually, one of the things I've been traveling a lot lately and kind of talking to customers and trying to find those customers that are really kind of doing some of that kind of cutting edge stuff. And the idea is that, yeah, we have a lot of things that we're doing within the research team. We have a very kind of robust research department at the Foundry. And the idea is, okay, how do we take that technology, find a couple key customers so that we can roll that out with some contacts, right? So here's some examples of things that people are doing. Here's some places this is going. And then, yeah, and open up to a wider net, get more customers involved, and then really make sure that we're kind of understanding, the 5 or 6 key workflows before we start flowing that down into a product. And so that's kind of this idea of it. And Modo VR is kind of just the first one, but you're exactly right. The idea is that, we'd have, several of those things would happen so that as a Modo 11 customer or a Modo 12 customer, there's also these kind of Foundry Labs products that you can download, play with, and trial. But if someone who's not interested, one of the ones that people say is, well, I don't care about, VR. Well, great. Then now you don't have to deal with it, right? You can kind of work on the core product, work in Modo. And for the people who are interested, they can go and pull down the labs builds and play with them and give us feedback. But I'm not putting into the core product where you kind of have to deal with something, if you will, before you feel like it's really, needs your attention.
One of the biggest gripes that we've heard over and over about that is, well, it's still coming, at a cost to new features to me on Modo. Well, it's really not true, because we have the Modo core team that does the features that you all are, buying into today in 11.0 and all the 10 series. And then we have, the Nexus team now with Stuart and Alan, really Stuart and Matt Cox and Matt Craig and a bunch of others championing that team. And then we have the special projects team that Derek was, helping manage, which is a bunch of different teams. It's not just one, particular team. So there's quite a few developers there. Then we have John Wendelden and his, research team at the CTO staff level. And all of those external teams are now feeding in with new technologies and new features into the Modo core team. So you're really, instead of just one, little team of Modo, you actually have a much bigger team of Modo, supplying in these ideas and these, technology improvements.
So I know we're about done here in terms of time. I think,
and not come out of the Modo team kind of not doing Modo features to make that. That really came out of the research group, kind of bringing that over to the Modo team. So it really is an additive thing, not a kind of taking away to do it type of a scenario.
Yeah.
Right. So
Greg, can I just add something about that real quick? I was one of the people that had zero interest in VR at first. I thought it was a fad. When I had the chance to try it at the Noman event in February, I did a complete 180. Now I'm deciding which one to buy, the Vive or the Oculus, because trying Modo, even though it was early days, just seeing Modo, it was kind of like you were inside the viewport. It was just pretty crazy.
I was honestly very cynical of it too, internally. And again, once you get that experience, it changes things. It really changes things.
When you see what some of the customers are doing with it and kind of how they're using it to kind of do some things that are really very unique and creative, you really do. I'm the same. I mean, I think if you've been in this industry for a while, or you've been in the software industry for a long time, this is the third go around here at VR. I think we've sort of seen the first two not be that interesting, and so I think there is a natural kind of VR fatigue, I think, for people who have been around for a while. But when you see what people are doing and how different it is where we are today, I think it's a lot more compelling and a lot more interesting and I think people are doing a lot more what I would consider solving real world problems with it today than I think ever happened in the past.
Yeah, VR, of course, as we all know, the trouble with VR is you can't understand VR until you try VR. And the people who try VR always generally come off saying they love VR. And I will tell you, I have clients coming to me asking for a VR project, and that is a area where I can pitch to clients. So if you're in this business, VR is a place to make money right now. There's a lot of money to be made in VR right now because people are dipping their foot in it. It may go away in a couple of years, you never know, but there's going to be billions made between now and then. So
there's billions pouring into it just from an R&D standpoint.
Yeah, there's a lot of money going into it. Yeah. Like we said in an earlier podcast, Facebook, Google, Apple, all these guys, big companies,
By the way, that Facebook stuff made with Modo.
What's that?
the Facebook stuff you just saw was made with Modo.
Facebook, that's right. James Darknell, former Foundry guy, now over at.
Guy used to report to me. Unfortunately, left, but he left to do some really, really cool stuff at Facebook.
At Facebook, they've got this cool new camera too, which they showed, which does point cloud gathering, and I think Nuke is gonna maybe.
Yeah, we announced that partnership as well, or something around there as well, just to read this week.
Right. Okay. So I think we can get maybe head out here. I think Shane, a couple of things we didn't touch on is licensing has changed a little bit, and also I think it may be worthwhile for you to sort of go on at some point, maybe make a video, just kind of go through the upgrade process now, what it's like to jump on maintenance, how to go through the nuts and bolts of doing that online. Don't have to do that right now. I don't think if you don't want to, we're an hour in. I don't know if people, maybe a standalone video would be better.
We're laying down a feature film of an interview here. Right?
Yeah. So why don't, maybe we can touch on that in the forums and the Slacks and the Skypes and all that stuff and how licensing is going to work. Maybe I know you guys are busy, but try to be active in there
The short statement there is it's not, I shouldn't say it's not RLM because it kind of technically is, but it's not maintenance RLM like maintenance RLM from the Foundry. It is a new thing. So maintenance for Modo now is not all this hassle of ordering and faxing us things. It's really, really nice. It's a simple login type of thing. You can log in on to up to 2 machines at a time. You legally can only use 1 at a time, but you can have it activated on 2 machines and just simply open Modo and close Modo, open Modo, close Modo. And then if you need a 3rd machine, you either open Modo, log out, and then you open it on a 3rd machine and log in. Or you can control that online through the browser. You can take machines on and offline from there.
Could I open Modo in 1 machine, start rendering? Perhaps in the play mode or the new mode you have there?
So rendering still is free. You don't need a license for network rendering or command line rendering of Modo. So you can still do that.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Or are we going to wrap this sucker up?
I think that's good. Again, thank you so much for putting this together in short notice.
Yes. Thank you very much.
I really would like to do more of these,
Yeah, so let's try to get Shane and Derek or some other Foundry people over here on a more regular basis. And like I said, it's a community effort. Let's keep fighting the good fight. A lot of us have have a lot invested in this program, in this industry, and it becomes a major part of your life when you sit in front of a computer longer than you sit with your kids during the day. So people do get passionate about things because it's a major part of your life. So, all right, let's wrap it up. Thanks for attending Pixel Fondue. We'll put this up online as soon as I can, and then we'll just see you, hopefully Teresa next week, definitely a round table in the next week or 2. And I think that's it. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, everybody.